often complain about the quality of the discourse being used within this community, specifically when it comes to terminology and facets of production. I actually made a whole video about it if you haven't seen it. After that video, a question I was asked often to varying degrees of politeness was, well, how do people improve the way they talk about animation? It's a fair question, but one that's hard to answer because I don't want to be just prescriptivist and put words into people's mouths. I believe it should be a journey of self-discovery. But I can empathize, of course, especially since it's an industry predominantly focused around media centered in a foreign environment. And the text can seem monstrously intimidating to dive into if you don't even know where to start. So I thought while I'm stuck inside that I would put together a list of 4 resources that I would recommend to help sort of break past that ceiling. Before I begin, I just want to lay out this huge disclaimer that I am not an academic, nor do I claim to be any sort of authority on any of these topics. Some of these texts come from academia, some do not. That wasn't a factor in what I chose. Instead, I chose based on these select criteria. 1. Accessibility. These are all free and easily viewable, and most do not have any required reading, sign-ups, trials, etc. 2. Digestibility. All of them can be read or consumed within a relatively short amount of time, and they're very easy to follow and understand. 3. Credibility. They all cite their sources and back up any claims that they make, so even if you disagree, you have a foundation to disagree against. 4. Usefulness. Now this is the most subjective, of course, but I believe that they're all incredibly useful for discourse and improving the way you talk, and I felt that I had a new perspective after I finished all of these for the first time. This is also not the be-all and end-all of analysis and research. This is not like the only 5 books you ever need to read. Watch more to come. This is just to sort of open the door and help sort of demystify what many might see as a difficult or closed-off field. So the first thing I want to recommend is Tofugu. Tofugu is largely a website dedicated to learning Japanese language and culture. You may know them as the makers of the popular Wanikani kanji learning application. And many of those guides cover anime at large. Not only are these articles usually very informative and digestible, they're also astoundingly well researched for what they are. Even if the article is only a few thousand words long, the bibliography is always meaty, with sources ranging from anime figures like Steinberg and Azuma to non-cultural citations like general art theory or business or whatever happens to be related to their argument. Sometimes they are very pointed too. For example, they have at least 2 very in-depth articles on Kisho Tenketsu, one on its ubiquity within Japanese horror, and another on its application in business and written speech. I recommend starting with an article titled Anime's Great Deception, the difference between anime and cartoons, which despite its kinda red flag raising name, is a thorough, nuanced analysis on how the codes of anime developed from television and particular usage of limited animation techniques and media mix. And if you get interested in learning Japanese too, all the better. There's really no better place to start from their citations. Their guides are really, really beefy. Yeah, it's good shit. Whenever I make a video these days, at the start of my research, I'll always check to see if Tofugu has something interesting to say about it. This book changed the way I fundamentally look at anime and animation in general. It wasn't an all-at-once thing. It wasn't like some sudden eureka moment or anything like that. I'm not saying that's what's gonna happen to you, because people can claim false advertising. But slowly over time, I started to see the principles that Lamarre argues everywhere. The anime machine is largely focused on how anime operates, how it's constructed, and how the story is told through its techniques. In particular, Lamarre focuses on what he calls animatism, which is something like the equivalent of cinematography in film, and how animation is about the relationship between layers and their horizontal and vertical movement to create parallax, and by extension, show their worlds. It's a great read, and not particularly meaty. Unlike some other theory books, I don't think it has many prerequisite readings or required knowledge before getting into it, other than maybe some animation fundamentals. The latter half of the book does get a little bit complicated, but I don't think it's too bad. However, if you're still a little daunted, the first section has been distilled down in an article called The Multiplanar Image, which is available to read for free on his website. This chapter outlines how the multiplanar camera is what allowed for the development of these codes, in a very Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message kind of way, and likens the effect to watching the scenery move by while looking out of a train window. This chapter is only around 20 pages long, so at the very least, please read that chapter. The whole book can be found online as well, and Lamarre has a ton of great stuff on his website, just there, it's free. Like the dude goes beast mode, like he just reveals his bunkai and Kenpachi comes out and he's like, yeah, I'm Kenpachi, I'm gonna do that. And Kenpachi's Cartman all of a sudden. So the official quarantine rules are that I have to wear a mask out on the balcony, so, I mean, before this year, I was just a disembodied voice for all you know, so who gives a fuck? Tanaka Motoko is a Japanese cultural critic who has written extensively about the apocalyptic imagination within the Japanese cultural consciousness. Her stuff can be pretty chunky, but what I've listed today is an incredibly consumable article titled Trends of 2000s Japanese Pop Culture, which succinctly defines three very important genres. Sekai-kei, born after Evangelion, Subaibu-kei, born after Battle Royale, and Nichijou-kei, born after Azumanga Daioh. Tanaka explores how each genre imagines space, the world around the characters, and the portrayal of the other. And like the anime machine and production, this article fundamentally changed the way I look at genre and thematic approach. Another thing we can gain from this article is how strict the criteria for these genres are, in much the same way that cyberpunk is very specific and cannot be used willy-nilly to describe any science fiction that happens to have a character with a mohawk and a laptop in it, or even older works like Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which has some of the elements but is too far removed from the birth of the movement. These genres have very specific lineages and commonalities that make them very important to distinguish. For example, Nichijou-kei is not the same as slice of life or cute girls doing cute things, because they are noted for their distinct lack of any other, be it parents or love interests, to interrupt the everydayness, which separates it easily from the likes of, say, romantic comedies or dramas. This type of mindset, I believe, is really important to have, especially in this day and age of calling anything that just happens to have a big titty brown elf GF as an isekai. I mean, this is not how it works, son. In casual conversations, of course, blanket terms like sci-fi and fantasy are totally appropriate. But if you're making a very specific claim about a particular framework, it doesn't hurt to know the right terminology. Much of what she has written about is borrowed from Tsunehiro and his book Zero Nendai no Souzou Ryuku, or Imagination in the 2000s, which isn't even translated into English, which should be an indicator of exactly how vital and hot off the presses this information is. Fuck, it's hot out here. The Kanzenshuu is a site related to all things Dragon Ball, with detailed guides about each main release, supplementary materials, databooks, and dispelling common myths about the franchise. Of particular note, they have a very extensive catalog breaking down the animation process of the series, and this is what I want to recommend today. Though specifically focusing on Dragon Ball and Toei's process, they have an incredibly thorough, yet very understandable, breakdown of the entire production workflow. This includes both the original traditional cell animation style and the more modern approaches with things like the films and Dragon Ball Super. And when I say thorough, I mean thorough. They break down every single step, crew position, timeframes, technology used, and a decent overview of terms in both English and Japanese. My personal favorite sections are the Animation Supervisor Catalog, which details the certain little quirks and flares that distinguish key personnel throughout the evolution of the series, and the Animation Quality page, which forms a very nuanced take about whether things like budget or being off-model constitutes animation quality. Which, if you know me, that's the sound. This is really important to me because it emphasizes how much animation is a group effort, how much time it actually takes, how much subcontracting goes on, how much input the original creator has, and ultimately how long everything takes. And this is absolutely vital when engaging with the production of a work and not falling into what I call the auteur illusion, attributing everything into a work, good or bad, to a single person or studio. Though each studio has their own variations and approaches and whatnot, the information presented here is very applicable across the entire industry. And even if you aren't interested in Dragon Ball at all, it's a great baseline for understanding more about the cogs and gears that make this anime machine turn. It was a pretty good one, wasn't it? Yeah, I'm proud of that one. Okay, so before you start, never ever cite Wikipedia as a source. I mean, never. Just don't do it. It should be obvious. But, you know what Wikipedia does that people who only cite Wikipedia don't? Cite their shit. Checking through all the sources that Wikipedia cites can be a great place to start a research session, as they often pull from very credible sources. They often include a link to either the original article or a section of the book on Google Books, highlighted and ready to go if something happens to catch your interest. If there isn't a link, you could always search that book on ResearchGate or academia.edu, which will grant you access to the original author's file if it's available on the internet completely legally. I've found some very good sources through this method. For example, for an upcoming video, I found an offhand mention to Fred Patten, one of the founders of the very first English language anime club, and his book, Watching Anime, Reading Manga, which was a collection of very thorough, boots-on-the-ground articles from the perspective of a very ahead-of-the-curve community member. While on this note, you should also check the Japanese Wikipedia with a tentative recommendation to use the Google Chrome Auto-Translate function tab. If you find a section that seems interesting, I recommend going back to Japanese, copying it, and putting it through DeepL Translate, which is a translation tool which I find is a little more accurate than Google Translate, especially when it comes to finding the context of the original sentence and things like localizations. Again, never ever directly cite this because this is machine translation of a community edited website, but especially if you're looking into Japanese audience engagement, it can be a great diving board to jump into the pool of insert synonym for credibility, look it up later. This goes for any website, be it Tofugu or Sakuga Blog or Full Frontal or AutoQuest. Check what sources they cite and see if they're available. It's what I've found to be the easiest way to get better, pointed recommendations. Getting a lot of exercise in this fucking 16 square meter room. So that should keep you busy for a little while, hopefully. But I really want to stress that this is not the one-stop shop for all things anime discourse related. These aren't even necessarily what I think are the best or even my personal favorite things that I've read or recommended. This is just sort of intended as a sort of starter pack of sorts. You should be buying, those booster sets whenever you can. You gotta get that. You gotta be thinking about the metagame, right? And I think it's really important that you discover sources on your own. Not only because you can tailor it to your specific interest, but it will feel ultimately more satisfying when you do. Even if you start reading something and think, yeah, I know this, but what is this, grade school? All this does is create a greater association in your brain, and you're bound to find something interesting that you hadn't considered before. Sometimes even the smallest tidbit of information can spark huge inspiration. My Azumanga Daioh format video is where I consider the biggest shift in my content to have happened, and where I really started to find my feet and my voice and what unique things I could offer. And my entire argument of that video, and indeed my opinion and interpretation of the show's themes, its genre, and the intersection of manga media, completely changed from a single piece of information that I read in a book that I happened to be skimming through at the library one day. That's it for today. I hope you found something useful or interesting for you. And as always, I'm going to sign off with the wise words of famed cultural critic and ornithologist Gil Lies here.
Oh shit, I'm sorry. Sorry for what? Our daddy taught us not to be ashamed of our dicks, especially since they're such good size and all. Yeah, I can see that. Your dad gave you good advice. It gets bigger when I pull on it. Sometimes I pull on it so hard, I rip the skin.
So true.